I'd better introduce myself before I introduce Carol. I'm David Monks. I'm one of the two publishers at Herbury Books. We are a small publishing company based here in rural North Wales, and we have a strong interest in mental health and the stories that mental health can tell us, which is one of the reasons that we were so keen for Carol's book to make out into the world. There's a bit of a funny story about the birth of Carol's book the last time round, because we're doing a launch party about 6 months after the launch party was actually due to happen. And that is because when Carol's book came out on the 1st of March, we found ourselves in lockdown very, very soon afterwards. And what ultimately happened was that just as Carol's book was released, Amazon stopped accepting book orders from warehouses like ours. So Carol's book was released onto the world, and then it promptly was sort of shackled at birth. So we're very much hoping that this meeting tonight is a way of unshackling Carol's book and giving it the absolute chance it deserved all along. So it's my absolute pleasure to welcome Carol tonight. What an amazing character. Carol studied at the Sorbonne in Paris. She moved to Wales to live the good life in the 70s. She learnt to scuba dive in her 60s, and she published her first book at the age of 70. So a very, very warm welcome to you, Carol.
Thanks, David. Just prompts me to wonder what I will be doing at 80.
We wait with bated breath to see.
So do I.
So Carol's first book, The Alchemy of Kindliness, came out in March, like I said, and we're now hoping to give it the send-off into the world that it deserves, the proper launch it deserves. So, Carol, to start with, what led you to write Alchemy of Kindliness?
Oh, well, it's a little bit of a mixture of things that led me to it, really. Obviously, I don't know exactly who is taking part here, but most of you will know the story, I think, that of the death of my daughter, which was the main prompt. And the reason for that was I was interested to know from the years I spent battling for the truth and justice about her death, and just how prevalent mental health problems were in the UK. It wasn't just a personal tragedy. I started to see it as a social tragedy. And that, plus my wish to actually put it on paper and look at it more objectively from a therapeutic point of view, personally, led me to think about using my story in a novel. I didn't want it to be a factual story. And I think the story of somebody's tragedy like this, just unalloyed, is too much for a reader. Mm-hmm. I had other interests as well that I wanted to explore. And having lived in Wales for nearly 50 years now, I actually wanted to locate it in Wales and talk about the things that I'm quite passionate about, which is nature, the countryside, gardening, local history. That's quite a big one. Mm-hmm. And when I thought about these things, and especially the history of this house, where the old lady who lived here, by all accounts, was quite a cliche of an old lady who was bitter, angry, sour.
Absolutely.
I started thinking about what leads a person to become that cliche of an old lady. And I thought, well, I don't want to be that. So I thought, well, what is it that makes some people overcome whatever it is in life that's caused them to feel angry and bitter? And what is it that makes some people actually emerge with understanding and compassion and a positive outlook on life? Absolutely. And that was the start of my thinking about how to weave different stories together.
Mm-hmm. Now, it's very interesting that many novels are set in a time frame, or they have elements of the same person at different points in their lives. But you managed to interweave two storylines together, anchored on the property that you subsequently live in. And
Yes.
these two story arcs, for people who haven't read the book, are set 70 years, well, 60 years apart. So in the World War II era and in modern times. How did you manage to run the two storylines together and unite them? And was it hard to actually bring them together into a conclusion of the actual book?
Oh, it was very hard, actually. And I was always wondering, do I do two sections? So do I do Annie's story? Do I do Sarah's story? And
Sure.
are they just separate? And then I started thinking, no, I think there's more links. I want to link them together, and I want to link them together subtly. I want to show differences, but I also want to show similarities between the cultures and the attitudes prevailing in the two eras, how human beings are human beings no matter where and when they live, with the same faults, failings, happinesses.
And yeah, there are quite a few links, I suppose, in the plot line of the book. I won't give any spoilers to people who haven't read the book, but there's a shocking discovery on the part of Sarah that unites the past with Annie. A shocking discovery in the garden.
Yes.
There's the property itself and the place. Some of the people are still around, or remnants of that sort of imprint those people had on society. But really, it's kind of anchored in place. And one of the things I particularly like about your writing style, and this is very much like Dostoevsky or Dickens, is that you can take a narrative which is very interesting and very rich, but you can also paint pictures and portraits of people and characters in that sort of scenery of the book, and they very much come alive to us, and they're very much made dynamic and made vivid in our imaginations, that we can really see ourselves in their shoes and see them standing in front of us as
Oh, good.
characters.
Thank you. I'm glad I've managed to do that. Yes.
Quite an art, quite an art. I think on that note, we should have a short reading from you.
Okay. I have sort of, because we've been talking about the two parallel stories and how they are linking together all the time through common shared interests, loves, fears, and so on and so forth, I thought I would actually just take a short section about that and how Sarah and Annie gradually came together psychologically, if you like. And it's from
Absolutely.
Sarah's point of view, because of course Annie by then was dead. So one morning, a sudden downpour sent me scurrying inside. I sorted through some miscellaneous junk piled haphazardly in the corner of a barn, intending to throw it in the pickup and take it to the tip. Most of it was rubbish, but among the old books and magazines, tins of rusty screws, balls of rotting string, I found an old-fashioned Bakelite door handle, caught within it all the colours of the rainbow. I sat on my heels and contemplated it. Tasteless and gaudy as it was, it filled me with sadness. Sadness at this evidence of what I imagined was the human quest for beauty in the bleakest of lives, for something to gladden the eye and push aside the worries and fears, the unremitting toil a place such as this must have demanded. Well, in contrast, the garden was a treasure trove. Everywhere I looked gave up one delightful secret after another, and I began to sense the special relationship the previous owner had to the garden. To the outside, not the inside. Just like me, I thought, and I felt less of an intruder. It didn't surrender any priceless artifacts. A clump of rich, deep pink peonies here in the corner of a wall, rows of bittersweet raspberries of a long-vanished variety underneath brambles as high as the cottage roof. And the roses. One morning, there they were, peeking out from the middle of the enormous buddleia, nodding in the breeze. I wasn't a lover of roses. They smacked of formal Victorian gardens and fussy pedantry. But so ridiculous did they look, I had to smile and scrambled into the heart of the buddleia to cut half a dozen blooms. I was immediately a convert, their old-fashioned powder puff perfume beguiling me. Annie's roses. Now, I just want to just do two little bits from the point of view of Annie and from the point of view of Sarah, just to drive that point home. This is Annie. Gardening she loved, even if it meant her nails were broken and her fingers ingrained with dirt no amount of scrubbing or washing dishes could remove. So that the girls up in the village oohed and ahed at them, wondering how she could bear to let them look such a disgrace. She knew without thinking what the plants needed, when they needed it, and the regular movements of digging and hoeing, almost a dance, gave space for her dreams, yet anchored her to the urgencies of life. And now this is Sarah. It's in the first person. I turned towards the garden. Of course, gardening had always been a refuge, and all the gardens I ever had, sanctuaries. They rewarded and solaced me, distracted me, and this garden drew me more than any before. The sense of sharing it with Annie grew stronger day by day as I worked. I could see her hand everywhere, and as best I could, tried to keep the spirit of what I imagined she gave to the garden. Everyone said I had green fingers, meaning I knew instinctively where to cut, prune, dig, weed, water and feed, and when to stand back. I understood this perfectly where plants were concerned. I'll leave it there, I think.
Like I said, an amazing ability to not just paint pictures of a narrative or characters even, but to bring feelings alive in our minds as we read your manuscript and your book. And that's one of the first things that was apparent to me when I even saw the first draft manuscript. It kept me up, and I know it kept our commissioning editor up quite late, because it sucks you in, and these scenes set in words draw you into them. Where did you find your inspiration from for the characters, Carol? Did they take inspiration from people you know, or people?
Oh, yes. Oh, yes, a lot of. I don't think anybody would recognise themselves particularly, but particularly the character of Dilwyn, who, in a way, is my favourite character in the book in many ways.
The anti-hero.
Yeah, Dilwyn, yeah, I don't know if he's an anti-hero really, but he is the link between Sarah and Annie, and he also, for me, represents a whole lifetime of association with actually old men, farm labourers, workers in the countryside. My father, who was a head gardener, and who I imbibed all my sort of gardening skills, if you like, from. So he is a composite character, and all the stories that come out that surround him are stories that I've taken from various parts of my life and various characters in my life, and I've woven them together and I've put them together in Dilwyn. So Dilwyn is, yes, this composite rural farm labourer, really, I suppose. Tithlian, I think she's based on all the women I ever met who were, can I say, inspired by the magical understory of the world, alternative ways of thinking and perceiving how the world might work. Yeah. So I liked her because she gave a sort of subtle under story. Evan, no, he sprang out of his own accord. He wrote himself, which was quite weird, really. Jan. Yes, Jan, I did a vast amount of research into the Poles because he was essential to Annie's story. For those of you who haven't read it, he was essential to her story. And he represented another link to the present day, which is that of not quite the refugee, but the outcast,
The
the person
outsider,
who drew the xenophobia of the local community in which he found himself, and who ultimately came adrift because of that. And that's where the birth of Annie's tragedy came from. So that's a lot of research from books written by Poles about Poles in this story.
Of course, we must never forget that the Poles after the war were treated quite abominably by the British. They were either sent home to be shot, or they had to find themselves drifting across the world. It's quite a disgrace, really.
Yes, I was quite shocked, actually. I almost felt ashamed to be British after reading some of that. So, and The Simpsons, just the last one, if I may. The Simpsons came out of my background. My father was a head gardener on landed gentry estates. I grew up in that environment, and I drew on all the stories from there. Yes. So
now, one of the things that I felt strongest after reading Annie's story arc in particular, and the failings of the characters in their completely fallible, human, weak, petulant, churlish, but still very rich ways, was, am I like that too? Is everyone? Was that a deliberate question that you were posing to the reader, or is that a happy accident?
Well, I don't know about a happy accident, but I guess that sort of grew. Of course, we're all like that, actually. I mean, we're human, and we've got good points, bad points, failings, lovely things about ourselves. And I think one of the big issues that I wanted to look at, and which gave birth to the title of the book, was the Alchemy of Kindliness. And one of the things I learned from my years of training as a shiatsu practitioner was the concept of compassion for yourself, primarily. And compassion for yourself is essential if you want to have compassion for others as well. And
I know we've got someone asking you a question, Tamsin. I'll get back to you on this at the end with the questions. Keep your hand raised and I'll come back to you, don't worry. So to sum up, Carol, it's this idea of compassion and self-compassion running through there.
Yes, I think so. And I think we all have a sort of rather comforting and illusory myth about our own estimation of who we are. And actually, when we come up against that horrible mirror that shows us that we're not what we thought we were at all, whether it's an event in life or another person that gives us that reflection back. Without that, I don't think we can start to understand other people.
Absolutely.
And in the story, I mean, Sarah, if those of you have read it, I mean, there's a lot of mention of Sarah and the universe shattering. For instance, when she learned she was adopted, suddenly she wasn't who she felt she was. Nothing was how she felt she was. How did she deal with that? And then Sarah also thinking of herself initially as like a terrier with her teeth embedded in some ankle or other. Yeah. And then she didn't like that. So she thought she'd rather be a bull, stomping and goring. And so it just goes to show we sort of fabricate our own myths about who we are.
That is very true.
And I just one little thing I'd like to say is I spent a lot of years working with a friend of mine on his walking expeditions company, and he always used to sing a song. He used in the evenings around the campfire, I'd get his guitar out. I don't know if he's actually here, but he'll know who he is. And he'd sing a song. I
certainly am.
Good. And he would sing this song called Walk a Mile in My Shoes.
Yeah.
Before you abuse, criticize and accuse, walk a mile in my shoes. And it permeated my brain from all those years. And so, you know, we've got that in the story. We've got Evan, who is the ostensible baddie. You know, he's the one we can all think, oh, what a horrible person, how awful. But actually, he does transform himself with his own recognition of how he's been and what he's been. And the same with Dilwyn, who's the goody. I mean, he keeps secrets. He actually wrecked a lot of the tragedy.
He wrecked a lot of lives, didn't he?
Yeah, he did.
Now, I think we should have another short reading from you, Carol, and then jump off into the next little section, which is about some of the emotions and mental health related to the book. So if you go ahead with your reading, and we'll come back to this.
Okay, well, I've sort of based it on the last concept of compassion and understanding of oneself. So it's actually about Evan.
Okay.
And it's based after he comes into the cottage and he realizes that his cousin, Annie, has had this baby. I'm not going to go into more of the story for those of you who haven't read it, but this is Evan. He whispers, "You've had the baby. Where is it?" Apart from a slight hunching of her neck into her shoulders, she shows no sign of having heard him. "Where's the baby, damn you, Annie?" he shouts now, fearful of her unhearing emptiness. For answer, she raises an arm and points towards a corner, her gaze still rapt on the flames dancing in the grate. He looks over to where she points and sees an old Hessian sack. He steps across the space between and pokes it gingerly, fearfully with his foot. I hope this isn't a spoiler.
Maybe we should leave it there then, because I know what the next quote is, and I think that'll be a giveaway. If you want to know what was in the sack and how it ties up with the baby.
Oh, right. I've lost the point of that reading then. I've just realised it's a spoiler for any of you that haven't read it.
You've not lost the point of it, because it's an incentive for anyone who hasn't read the book to go and read it. So that's actually quite useful.
I should skip that bit then, but there is a bit at the end where Evan knows himself to be a broken man. He looks through the eyes of others to see the years of carping, whining, the little man he has been, that he has brought another being to this pass, that his treachery, his jealousy, his hatred gave rise to such a horror. It is hardly to be borne. But they are down-to-earth people. They go about the daily chores as usual. The cow must be milked, the ewes tailed, the hedges trimmed, the hay cut and carted. Annie does not speak a word, and Evan weeps silently when no one is looking. He is smaller, softer somehow, the bitterness slowly draining out through the holes the events of the past year have pierced in the fabric of his being. Gradually, the ripples calm and die away, until there is nothing on the surface to mark the thrown stone.
Powerful. Now, obviously, there are themes running through the book, some quite fundamental themes: choice, truth, obsession. How did you find the experience of distilling these into the book, and how did they affect you as you were doing it? It's obviously very powerful emotional exploration, but how did you find that process?
Well, the major one that arose from the writing of it was the concept of kindliness, by which I mean compassion and understanding. I've already sort of talked about that. But other things are, for instance, the truth. Oh, what a tricky shapeshifter that proved to be, especially as I wrote it and it developed. And I think in the writing, I actually became much more aware of how ephemeral the truth is. I mean, it's like you're trying to grasp a fistful of water and it just goes through your fingers. And one man's truth is another man's fake news.
Completely. Highly topical. I think that's mostly, or most prevalent where it comes to a head in the book, is actually the courthouse scene. And I won't give any spoilers, but in the courthouse scene, the truth is so obviously not present. People are all saying what their truth is, but it ain't fact.
That's
it has
right.
no bearing on reality, but they're all saying their piece.
And I wondered, I also thought, is the truth a cultural thing as well? are there different truths for different cultures? Are there different truths for different time periods? Well, there certainly are. I mean, the truth for somebody who was brought up in the Victorian era or through the wars is very different to the truth that we understand about the world now. And Sarah, certainly in the book, found that the truth that she always wanted was not the truth that actually emerged. Her perception of Annie, for example, and she also thought that the truth would release her from pain, which it didn't. And Morris, his belief that what he heard was Polish, when in fact in the point where he heard somebody shouting this foreign language at him, well, it wasn't foreign at all, it was Welsh. But because he wanted it to be Polish, he heard
That's
Polish.
what he heard. And that happens to us a lot.
We hear and see what we want to see, and that becomes the truth. And also for Jan and the British that he thought were a ruthless and insensitive people. And he'd heard Mr. Simpson talking about a government minister who had pronounced the cliffs of Dover are where civilization ends. And he'd wondered which side of the cliffs does he mean?
Well, begs the question, doesn't it? Now, mental health plays quite a key role in the book. Do you think that things have improved or worsened in the past few years with how mental health is dealt with?
I don't think I'm the best person to answer that question, really. But all the research I've done, all the people I've talked to, including all the lovely people from Gwyneth Mon Mind and from the outreach mental health team at Ysbyty Gwyneth, where I work, and various other people who are involved in the mental health world, I would say it is getting worse. I don't know that statistics bear this out, but we know statistics, damn statistics, you know, they can prove anything. So I don't know. I think yes. And I certainly think that, you know, the last 6 months will have seen a rise in mental health problems, maybe not life debilitating ones, but certainly people who perhaps have been able to distract themselves, you know, with their activities, going to the cinema, going to the pub, parties, restaurants, you know.
Removes that distraction that we all hide behind, doesn't it?
Yes, that's, I think, yeah.
Just for anyone who's watching, the book is available from us, Herbury Books. It's available from Amazon. If you search for The Alchemy of Kindliness. You can get it through WH Smith's on their website. You can go into the shop and ask for it in person. And the same applies to Waterstones. You can get it from Waterstones on their web shop or ask them to order it in for your local branch. And
here's what it looks like, by the way. It says not for resale right across the middle of my copy, of course, but
yeah, that's the pre-release copy, actually. The release copies are a bit smarter. Yeah. Have we got?
Well, can I say something about that, David, please, to everybody? I don't know if anybody's aware of it, but I am donating 50% of all of my royalties to 2 local health charities. One of which is Gwyneth Mon Mind. They have a suicide awareness training program for anybody who wants to attend it. And another is for a family who live down near Harlech, who's set up a sanctuary for people on, I don't know whether it's on the cliffs. Unfortunately, I've not been able to go down there because of COVID, but they've set up a sanctuary for people who have mental health problems, just want respite. And it's called Josh's Lighthouse Project.